The new intern slapped me and threw coffee on me, then loudly proclaimed her husband was the CEO of this LA firm. I calmly called my husband. "You should come down here. Your new wife just threw coffee all over me. I still have the blouse." I don't know why I kept it. The stain set within hours, a rusty brown bloom across cream silk that no dry cleaner could lift. Maybe I kept it because it was evidence. Maybe I kept it because I needed proof that it happened the way I remember it happening, that I wasn't being dramatic, that the shock I felt was proportional to the act. Or maybe I kept it because some part of me knew, even then, that I'd need to remember what it felt like to be that woman, the one who stood there dripping, watching her carefully constructed world crack down the middle while 43 employees pretended to look at their computer screens. My name is Margot Chen Whitfield. I'm 51 years old. For 26 years, I built a law firm from a 2-room office, above a bakery on Wilshire, to a 17-story tower in Century City with 212 employees and a client list that would make any corporate attorney weep with envy. I did this alongside my husband, David Whitfield, who was, technically, legally, on paper, the CEO. But everyone who worked at Whitfield & Associates for more than a month understood the truth. I was the engine. David was the face. It was an arrangement that worked for us. David loved the golf games with clients, the charity galas, the firm retreats in Cabo where he could play the charming host. He was good at it, genuinely good. His ability to make people feel seen and valued brought in business I couldn't have attracted with my quieter, more exacting presence. And I loved the work itself, the strategy, the structure, the satisfaction of watching cases unfold exactly as I'd planned. We were partners in every sense. For 23 years of marriage and 26 years of building something together, we balanced each other until we didn't. The first time I met Sienna Marsh, I thought she was someone's assistant's assistant. She was young, 26, I'd later learn, with the kind of aggressive blondness that comes from an expensive colorist and the kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no. She was standing in the lobby of our building when I came back from a lunch meeting, tapping at her phone with fingernails so long I couldn't imagine how she typed. I didn't think anything of it. People came and went from our building constantly. We shared the tower with an investment firm and a talent agency. I walked past her to the elevator, already mentally reviewing the contract language I needed to revise that afternoon. I didn't know then that I'd just walked past the woman who would throw hot coffee in my face 3 months later. I didn't know that my husband had already been sleeping with her for 8 months. I didn't know that the weekend golf trip he'd taken to Palm Springs the month before hadn't been about golf at all, that they'd stayed at the same hotel where he and I had celebrated our 20th anniversary, that he'd ordered the same wine we'd shared that night, and told her she was the first person who'd ever truly understood him. I didn't know any of that yet. I was just a woman walking to an elevator, thinking about work, secure in the shape of my life. I noticed the changes, but I misinterpreted them. David started working out more. He'd always been fit, but now he was at the gym at 5 in the morning, coming home with the kind of muscle definition that requires serious dedication. I told him he looked good. I meant it. I thought it was a midlife health kick, the kind of thing men do when they turn 54 and start thinking about their mortality. He started paying more attention to his clothes, new suits, new ties, a watch that cost more than our first car. When I asked about it, he said he wanted to look the part now that the firm was growing. "We're playing in the big leagues now, Margot. I can't show up looking like a public defender." I laughed. I agreed. I didn't see the lie underneath. He was less present with me, but I attributed that to the same exhaustion I felt. We'd been working 80-hour weeks for 2 decades. We'd sacrificed vacations, weekends, sometimes basic sleep. It made sense that our conversations had become logistical, that our intimacy had become scheduled, that we existed in the same house like 2 professionals sharing an office. I told myself this was normal. I told myself all long marriages went through phases. I told myself that we'd earned the right to be tired. What I didn't tell myself, what I couldn't let myself see, was that my husband was already gone. He was sitting across from me at dinner, sleeping beside me at night, but in every way that mattered, he'd left. She was hired as an intern in our contracts department. I didn't handle the hiring of interns. That was 3 levels below my daily operations. But I saw her name on the new employee list. Sienna Marsh, JD candidate, UCLA Law. and I saw her photograph in the onboarding documents that crossed my desk for final approval. I thought she looked too old to be an intern. Something about her eyes, maybe. The way she posed for the photo, like she was already the most important person in the room. I initialed the documents without a second thought. Later, much later, I'd learned that David had arranged the internship personally. He'd called the hiring manager, praised Sienna's qualifications, suggested she'd be an asset. He'd made it clear that this hire was a favor to him without ever explicitly saying why. The hiring manager, a woman named Patricia, who'd worked for us for 11 years, told me later that she'd felt uncomfortable, that something about the request seemed off, that she'd almost said something to me, but she didn't. And I don't blame her. David was the CEO. His requests weren't supposed to require explanation. The morning it happened was a Thursday in March. I remember the weather was perfect. One of those Los Angeles days that makes you understand why people put up with the traffic and the cost and the earthquakes. 72 degrees, cloudless blue sky, the kind of light that makes everything look like a movie set. I was in early, as usual. 6:30, coffee from the break room, reviewing the settlement proposal for the Hendricks case. The office was quiet. I loved that hour before the building filled up, when I could think without interruption. By 8, the usual chaos had begun. Phones ringing, assistants rushing, the constant hum of people doing important work badly, while pretending to do it well. I had a 9 o'clock meeting with the partners to discuss quarterly projections. I was gathering my materials when my assistant, Daniel, appeared in my doorway. "Mrs. Whitfield, there's a situation in the main lobby." Daniel had been with me for 7 years. He was unflappable. The fact that he'd come to my door instead of handling whatever it was himself told me it was significant. "What kind of situation?" He hesitated. "I think you should come see." I set down my files, followed him through the corridor, past the conference rooms, toward the reception area where the elevators opened onto our floor. I heard it before I saw it. A woman's voice, high and sharp, cutting through the professional murmur of a law office at work. "Don't care who you think you are. I need to see David Whitfield. Right now. Do you understand? Right now." I came around the corner and saw her. Sienna Marsh was standing at the reception desk, leaning over it in a way that made our receptionist, a sweet woman named Barbara, who'd worked for us since the beginning, lean back in her chair. Sienna was wearing a white dress that probably cost what Barbara made in a week. Her hair was perfectly styled. Her makeup was perfect. Everything about her was perfect, in that aggressive, expensive way that certain women cultivate like a weapon. I approached calmly. I was still thinking of this as a management problem, an intern behaving inappropriately, a situation that would require a conversation with HR. "Is there a problem here?" Sienna turned. Her eyes swept over me with the kind of dismissive evaluation I'd seen 1,000 times in my career, the quick assessment that women like her make when confronted with women like me. She took in my age, my gray-streaked hair, my practical suit, and decided I was no one important. "I need to see David Whitfield," she said. "It's urgent, personal." "I'm afraid Mr. Whitfield isn't available at the moment. Perhaps you could leave a message with the reception and I don't think you understand." She smiled, and there was something cruel in it, something I recognized but couldn't quite place. "I'm not leaving a message. I need to see him, now." "And you are?" "I'm Sienna Marsh. I work here." The emphasis on work was strange. "In contracts." "I see. Well, Ms. Marsh, regardless of where you work, Mr. Whitfield has a 9 o'clock meeting that he's preparing for. You can schedule time with his assistant if—" "His assistant," she laughed. "Oh, that's perfect. That's just perfect." I felt the first flicker of unease, not because I understood what was happening, I still didn't, but because there was a quality to her anger that seemed disproportionate to the situation. The way she was looking at me wasn't the look of an employee frustrated by bureaucratic obstacles. It was personal. "I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice," I said. "We're in a professional environment, and this kind of, don't tell me what to do." Her voice had gone cold. The mask of pretty, petulant frustration slipped, and underneath was something harder. "I'm not some assistant you can order around. I'm not some nobody." She took a step closer to me. "Do you have any idea who I am?" By this point, several associates had emerged from their offices. I could see them in my peripheral vision, pretending to be busy while watching everything. Barbara was on the phone, calling security, I hoped. I know who you are, Ms. Marsh. You're an intern in our contracts department. And right now, you're creating a scene that's going to result in a conversation with human resources about appropriate workplace. Oh my God, she stared at me with something like wonder. You don't know, you actually don't know. Don't know what? She laughed. It was a terrible sound, high and grating and triumphant. I'm his wife, David's wife. She said it loudly enough that everyone in the lobby heard. We got married 3 weeks ago in Santa Barbara. I'm not some intern. I'm the CEO's wife. I own half this company. And you, she looked me up and down again, you need to tell me where my husband is, right now. I want to tell you that I handled the next moment with grace, that I maintained my composure, that I didn't let her see how those words landed, that I remained the composed professional I'd spent 30 years becoming. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because I understood suddenly and completely what I was looking at. The pieces that hadn't made sense. David's absences, his new gym routine, the charged quality of his voice when he took certain calls, snapped together into a picture I couldn't unsee. He'd married her, while he was still married to me. Not divorced, not separated, married to me, for 23 years. And then he'd married her. I said something. I don't remember what. Probably his name, probably a question, probably nothing coherent at all. My voice felt like it was coming from very far away. Sienna watched my face change, and she smiled. You're her, she said. You're the ex-wife, the one he warned me about. We're not, my voice cracked. We're not divorced. Of course you are. The divorce was finalized in February. He showed me the papers. Her smile flickered, just slightly. He said you were making it difficult, that you were bitter about him leaving, but that it was over. Has been for years. A marriage in name only. I shook my head. I was having trouble breathing. The lobby seemed to have gotten smaller, the air thicker. There was no divorce, I said. I never signed any papers. We never discussed. You're lying. Her voice had gone sharp again. You're lying because you're jealous. Because you can't accept that he chose me. That he's happy for the first time in his life. I'm not lying. You are. You're a bitter, pathetic, lying. I don't know what I would have done next. Maybe I would have screamed. Maybe I would have laughed. Maybe I would have simply walked away, called my own lawyer, begun the process of untangling the catastrophe my life had just become. But I didn't get the chance, because that's when she threw the coffee. Later, everyone would tell me it happened fast. That one moment we were standing, there, 2 women in a lobby, and the next moment I was dripping with hot liquid, while Sienna screamed obscenities, and Barbara was crying, and someone was yelling for security. But I remember it slowly. I remember the way she turned to grab the coffee cup from the reception desk. Barbara's coffee, left there in the chaos. I remember the arc of the liquid through the air, the moment before it hit my face and neck and chest, when I understood what was about to happen and couldn't move to stop it. I remember the heat. Not burning, the coffee had been sitting there long enough to cool, but hot enough to shock, hot enough to feel like violence. I remember the smell, the wet weight of my silk blouse clinging to my skin, the sound of my own startled cry. And I remember what she said after. That's for trying to destroy my marriage. That's for lying about my husband. That's for... She raised her hand. I think genuinely that she meant to hit me. I think in that moment she was so consumed by whatever David had told her about me, whatever lies he'd constructed to make her feel justified in hating a woman she'd never met, that she genuinely wanted to hurt me. I caught her wrist. I'm not a physical person. I've never been in a fight in my life. But some instinct moved my arm, made my fingers close around her wrist before her palm could connect with my face. We stood there for a moment, frozen, her straining forward, me holding her back, the entire lobby absolutely silent. Let go of me, she hissed. I did. She stumbled backward, caught herself, and then, maybe sensing that she'd crossed a line, that there were too many witnesses, that this had gone wrong somehow, she drew herself up with what dignity she could muster. This isn't over, she said. When David finds out how you treated me, I'll be sure to tell him myself. My voice was steady. I don't know how. You'll tell him? She laughed. You can't even get a meeting with his assistant. I don't need a meeting with his assistant. I pulled my phone from my pocket. Coffee was still dripping down my face, soaking into my collar, pooling in the collar of my ruined blouse. My hands were shaking, everything was shaking, but my voice stayed calm as I pressed the contact I'd pressed 10,000 times before. "David," I said when he answered, "you should come down to the lobby, right now. Your new wife just threw coffee all over me." The silence after I hung up was extraordinary. Sienna's face had gone pale. The triumph had drained out of it, replaced by something I couldn't read. Confusion, maybe, or the first flicker of doubt. "What do you—" She stopped. "Why do you have his personal number?" "Because I'm his wife." I wiped coffee from my cheek with the back of my hand. "His actual wife. The one he's been married to for 23 years. The one who built this company with him." I gestured at the office around us. "All of this? I built it with him, while we were married, while we are married." "No," she shook her head. "No, he showed me the divorce papers. I saw them. They looked forged, if they existed at all." I was beginning to understand, in a distant way, the full scope of what David had done. "There was no divorce, Ms. Marsh. He's a bigamist, which means your marriage isn't legal. And neither is whatever claim you think you have to this company. You're lying." "I'm not. You have to be lying." He loves me, he married me, he said he promised." Her voice cracked. Just for a moment, underneath the aggression and the entitlement, I saw something else. A young woman who had believed what she was told, who had built her life around promises that turned out to be forgeries. I might have felt sorry for her in another universe, if she hadn't just thrown coffee in my face, if she hadn't called me bitter and pathetic and jealous, if she hadn't raised her hand to hit me, but she had. So I didn't. "He lied to you," I said, "the same way he lied to me. You're just finding out faster than I did." The elevator chimed. David stepped off the elevator looking confused and slightly annoyed, the way he always looked when something interrupted his carefully structured day. He was wearing one of his new suits, the watch that cost more than our first car, a tie I didn't recognize. He saw me first, dripping, ruined, standing in the middle of a lobby full of silent employees, and his face went white. Then he saw Sienna. "What?" He looked between us. "What happened? What's going on?" "Ask your wife," I said. "Your other wife." "Margot, don't." I held up a hand. "Don't Margot me. Don't explain. Don't justify. Don't you dare stand there and try to spin this." He was good, I'll give him that. 23 years of watching him work a courtroom, charm a client, negotiate an impossible deal, had shown me what he was capable of. But I'd never seen him face a situation where all his usual moves were useless, where there was no angle to play, no narrative to construct. He tried anyway. "Sienna, sweetheart." He turned to her, hands out. "Why don't you go wait in my office? I'll explain everything, I promise, but right now I need to—" "Explain what?" Her voice was shrill. "Explain why your ex-wife says you're not divorced. Explain why she has your personal phone number. Explain why she says she built this company. She's lying, she's confused. The divorce was—" "Show me the papers," I interrupted. "Right now, show both of us the divorce papers you claim to have filed." "They're with my lawyer, I can't just—" "Which lawyer? Brian? Susan? Mark?" I named the divorce attorneys we'd worked with over the years, the ones whose numbers were in both our phones. "Call one of them, right now, ask them to confirm the divorce." He didn't move. That's what I thought. What happened next was chaos. Sienna screamed at David. David tried to calm her down. She threw her purse at him. Security arrived. Daniel called our head of HR. Our head of HR called our general counsel. Our general counsel looked at me, at my coffee-soaked face, at the scene unfolding in the lobby, and excused himself to make a phone call I suspect was to his own attorney. I stood apart from all of it, watching. I had spent 26 years building systems, hiring people, creating structures that could absorb shock and keep functioning. And now I watched those systems activate, not to protect the firm, but to protect me. Patricia from HR appeared at my side with a change of clothes, a suit jacket she'd grabbed from her own office, a shirt from the emergency supply we kept for late nights. Daniel brought me fresh coffee. Barbara, sweet Barbara, who'd been with us since the beginning, came around from her desk and hugged me, coffee stains and all. "I always knew something was wrong with him," she whispered. "I should have said something." "It's not your fault," I said, and meant it. Within an hour, I had a lawyer. Not one of ours, a personal attorney, a woman named Helen Cho I'd known for years, who specialized in exactly this kind of disaster. Within 2 hours, David had been escorted to a conference room where Helen and our general counsel were asking him questions. I suspected he couldn't answer. Within 3 hours, Sienna had left the building, accompanied by her own attorney, a man who'd apparently been on retainer for her family, who'd been called by a mother who'd heard the whole thing via a phone that had never been hung up. And within 4 hours, I was sitting alone in my office, staring at the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows I'd always loved, trying to understand how I'd gotten here. The investigation took 3 weeks. Helen was thorough. She found the forged divorce documents David had used to convince Sienna, documents that bore my signature, though I'd never signed them, created by a man who apparently specialized in that sort of thing for clients with money and secrets to hide. She found the bank accounts David had hidden from me, funneling money into investments in his name only, preparing for a departure he'd apparently been planning for over a year. She found the property in Palm Springs, not a rental for weekend golf trips, but a house, fully furnished, where David and Sienna had been playing at married life for months. And she found the letters, emails actually, between David and a friend from college, a man I'd met once or twice at reunions and never thought about again. David had written to him extensively about his plans, his frustrations with me, his certainty that I was holding him back, that I didn't appreciate him, that I'd changed from the woman he married into someone he didn't recognize. In those emails, he never mentioned that I'd taken his name and added it to mine when we got married. Never mentioned that the firm was originally called Chen Legal Services before he joined. Never mentioned that I'd deferred the equity splits in his favor for years because he said it mattered to him, because he needed to feel like an equal partner, even though we both knew who did what. In those emails, I was the villain, the cold, controlling woman who'd stolen his best years, the obstacle between him and his happiness. I read them once. Then I gave them to Helen and asked her to handle whatever needed handling. I couldn't read them again. The thing about betrayal is that it rewrites history. Every memory I had of the past 3 years, every conversation, every touch, every moment I thought I understood, became suspect. When did the lies start? Had that vacation in Italy been genuine, or had he already been thinking about her? When he told me he loved me on our anniversary, was he comparing me to someone else? When he laughed at my jokes, was he performing? I drove myself half mad with those questions. In the first weeks, I'd lie awake cataloging moments, looking for cracks, trying to pinpoint the exact instant when my husband became a stranger, but there was no exact instant. That's what I eventually realized. It wasn't a switch that flipped. It was a slow erosion, so gradual that neither of us saw it happening, until the foundation was gone and we were standing on nothing. Maybe I should have noticed. Maybe if I'd been paying closer attention to him, to us, to anything other than work, I would have seen the distance growing. Maybe I could have stopped it. Or maybe I'm being generous to myself. Maybe he was always capable of this, and I just refused to see it. I don't know. I'll probably never know. David resigned from the firm 2 weeks after the lobby incident. It wasn't my decision. The partners met, reviewed the situation, and concluded that his continued presence was untenable. The liability issues alone, the forgery, the potential fraud, the optics of a CEO who'd committed bigamy in full view of the staff, made the decision obvious. He tried to fight it, called me multiple times, left voicemails that started angry and became pleading and eventually devolved into something that sounded almost like the man I'd married, asking me to understand, to remember what we'd been, to give him a chance to explain. I didn't return the calls, not because I was being strong, because I was terrified that if I heard his voice, if I let him tell me whatever story he'd constructed to justify what he'd done, I might believe him. After 23 years, I knew how convincing he could be. I'd built a career watching him convince people of things. I'd let him convince me of things. I couldn't risk it. The divorce was straightforward, legally speaking. California is a community property state. We'd been married for 23 years. The firm, the house, the investments, the retirement accounts, everything went into a spreadsheet, was evaluated by professionals, and was divided according to formulas that didn't care about betrayal or coffee stains or forged documents. I got the firm. He got a buyout that would take years to pay, but was legally required. I got the house because I wanted it, and he didn't have the leverage to fight. He got the apartment he'd apparently rented in anticipation of all this, The one he'd never mentioned, the one with the view of the ocean that I'm sure he thought he deserved. Sienna's marriage to David was annulled. It had never been legal in the first place. A legal nullity from the moment the ceremony concluded. I don't know what happened between them after that. I don't know if she forgave him, blamed him, loved him, hated him. I tried not to care. I mostly succeeded. Months passed. The firm survived. I restructured, brought in new partners, promoted talented associates who'd been waiting for opportunities that David's presence had blocked. The work went on, clients came, cases were won and lost and settled. The machinery of a successful law practice continued to turn. I survived too, though that took longer. There's a particular kind of grief that comes from losing someone who's still alive. Widows talk about absence, the empty chair, the cold bed, the silence where conversation used to be, but I didn't have absence. I had presence. David was still out there, still living, still being whoever he'd become. I could have seen him if I wanted to. I could have called. I didn't want to. But the possibility sat there. A door I could have opened, a wound I could have poked. The grief was complicated by the fact that it had no clear ending, no funeral to mark the transition from married to not. So I made my own endings. I packed his things into boxes and had them shipped to his new apartment. I redecorated the bedroom, bought new furniture, hung art he would have hated on the walls. I planted a garden in the backyard, something I'd always wanted to do but hadn't because David didn't like the mess, the commitment, the presence of living things that needed tending. I tended them. I watched them grow. A year later, I saw her again, Sienna. I was at a restaurant in Beverly Hills, lunch with a client, discussing a merger that had nothing to do with anything that mattered to me anymore. I'd gotten good at that, going through the motions of the life I used to have, doing the work without caring about it the way I once had. She was at a table by the window, alone, staring at her phone. She looked different, thinner. Her hair was darker than I remembered. The aggressive blondness softened into something more natural. She was wearing jeans and a simple blouse, nothing like the designer white dress from that day in the lobby. I almost walked past without stopping. I don't know why I didn't. Sienna, she looked up. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Recognition, fear, anger, and then something that might have been resignation. Mrs. Whitfield. It's Chen now, actually. I went back to my maiden name. Oh, she looked down at her phone, then back at me. I heard about the divorce and everything else. I nodded. I didn't know what else to do. I'm sorry, she said. I hadn't expected that. For the coffee and the... She gestured vaguely. Everything. I believed him. I believed everything he told me. And I was horrible to you because of it. Yes, I said. You were. She flinched but didn't argue. I didn't know, she continued, about the forged papers, about any of it. He was so convincing. He had answers for everything. When I asked why you still worked at the firm, he said you were obsessed with him, that you couldn't let go. When I asked why he never introduced me to his family, he said they'd sided with you in the divorce. She laughed, bitter. There was always an explanation, and I wanted to believe him, so I did. And now? Now I know better. She shrugged. For what it's worth, which isn't much. I stood there looking at her, this woman who had thrown coffee in my face, who had called me bitter and pathetic, who had believed lies about me without question because believing them was easier than doubting the man she loved. And I tried to hate her. I really did, but I couldn't. Because I'd done the same thing, hadn't I? Believed what I wanted to believe, ignored the signs, told myself stories that let me keep living the life I'd built without questioning its foundation. She was 26. She'd fallen for a charming older man who made her feel special. She'd been manipulated by someone who was very, very good at manipulation. I'd been manipulated too, just for longer. It's not nothing, I said finally. The apology, it means something. She looked up, surprised. It doesn't fix anything, I continued, but it means you understand. That's more than a lot of people would do. She nodded slowly. Did you know he's engaged again? To someone else? I saw it on Instagram. She's younger than me. I hadn't known. I'd stopped looking for news about David months ago when I realized that every piece of information was a tiny knife, and I had enough wounds already. I didn't know. I thought about warning her, but... She shook her head. She wouldn't believe me. I wouldn't have believed me a year ago. No, I agreed. You wouldn't have. We stood there for a moment, two women with nothing in common except the man who had lied to both of us. I hope you're okay, she said. I hope things are better. They're different, I said. I don't know if they're better, but they're mine. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. I went back to my lunch, finished the meeting, closed the deal, drove home through traffic that didn't bother me anymore, past billboards for movies I'd never see, and restaurants I'd never visit, and a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. The house was quiet when I got there. I'd let Daniel go early. The cleaning service had come and gone. Everything was in its place, exactly as I'd left it, exactly as I'd arranged it. I made tea, sat in the garden, watched the light change as the afternoon became evening, and I thought about what I'd said to Sienna. They're mine, such a simple thing, such a small victory, in the context of everything I'd lost. But it was true. The house was mine, the firm was mine, the garden, the career, the future, all mine. Not something I'd built with someone else, not something I had to share or explain or justify, mine. The blouse is still in my closet. I take it out sometimes, look at the stain that won't come out, the rusty brown bloom across cream silk. I remember how it felt, standing there dripping while my world collapsed. I remember the heat of the coffee and the cold of the realization and the strange, detached calm that settled over me in the moments after. I should probably throw it away, but I don't, because it reminds me of something important, that I survived, that I stood there in the worst moment of my life, in front of dozens of witnesses, with coffee dripping down my face and my marriage ending in real time. And I didn't fall apart. I called my husband. I said, "Your new wife just threw coffee all over me." I took my life back. 3 years have passed since that Thursday in March. The firm is doing well, better than ever, actually. Without David's expensive tastes and hidden withdrawals, we're more profitable than we've ever been. I've expanded into new practice areas, hired young attorneys with ideas I never would have considered before, loosened my grip just enough to let the place become something different from what it was. I'm not the same person who built it, but I'm not worse either, just different. I started seeing someone last year, a man I met at a conference, a tax attorney from San Francisco, mild and careful and nothing like David. We took things slowly. I needed that. The deliberate pace, the absence of sweep me off my feet gestures that might have reminded me of someone else. He knows the whole story. I told him on our third date over dinner while he listened without interrupting and then said, "That sounds like an incredibly difficult thing to go through. I'm sorry." That was all, no judgment. No questions about why I didn't see the signs, no commentary on what he would have done differently. Just acknowledgement, just presence. It's not love, not yet. Maybe it never will be, but it's something good, something steady, something that feels sustainable in ways my marriage never did. And that's enough. I don't know what happened to David. I know he got engaged again, and then, according to the mutual acquaintances I can't avoid entirely, he got unengaged. Something went wrong. I don't know what. I don't want to know. He tried to contact me once, about a year after the divorce was finalized. An email, long and rambling, explaining himself, making his case, asking for, I don't know what. Forgiveness maybe, or just acknowledgement that what we'd had was real. Even if how it ended wasn't. I read the first paragraph, deleted the rest. It's not that I can't forgive him. I probably already have. In the way that forgiveness is really just the absence of active anger, the letting go of weight you're tired of carrying. It's that I don't owe him my attention anymore. I don't owe him a response, an audience, a witness to whatever he's telling himself about who he is and what he did. He can have his story. I have mine. The last time I thought about him, really thought about him, not just the passing awareness of someone you were married to for 2 decades, was 3 months ago. I was cleaning out a closet, the one where I'd shoved things I didn't want to deal with but couldn't bring myself to throw away. Old photos, ticket stubs, a box of letters he'd written me in the early years, before email, when we used to send each other actual paper correspondence on firm letterhead as a joke. I sat on the floor of that closet, surrounded by artifacts of a life I used to live, and I read through some of them. They were good letters, funny, tender, written by a man who knew me well and cared about making me laugh. A man who signed them yours always, D, like he meant it. Maybe he did mean it back then. Maybe the person who wrote those letters was a different person from the one who forged divorce papers and married another woman and let her throw coffee in my face. Or maybe he was always both. Maybe we all are, capable of real love and real betrayal, sometimes to the same person, sometimes in the same breath. I don't know. I put the letters in a box and put the box in storage. Didn't throw them away, but didn't keep them close either. That seemed right. What I remember most, when I let myself remember, isn't the coffee. It's the moment after I made the phone call, David's phone ringing in my ear. His voice, confused and slightly annoyed, and me standing there dripping, saying words I'd never imagined I'd say. Your new wife just threw coffee all over me. In that moment, I knew everything had changed. I knew my marriage was over, my life was about to get very complicated, and the person I'd trusted most in the world had betrayed me in ways I was only beginning to understand. But I also knew something else. I knew I could handle it. Not because I was strong or special or better than anyone else who'd been through something similar, but because I'd already survived harder things. Building a career in a field that didn't want me, negotiating deals against people who underestimated me, working 80-hour weeks for 26 years, and never once taking a break. Coffee was just coffee. Betrayal was just betrayal. Both could be cleaned up. Both could be survived. And I knew, standing there in that lobby, that I would survive this too. I did. The stain on the blouse never came out, but I wear the silk again. Different blouses, different days, different versions of myself, walking into rooms where people underestimate me and walking out with what I came for. The garden is growing. The firm is thriving. The man from San Francisco is coming to visit next weekend. And I am here, still standing, still building, still mine. That's enough. That's more than enough. The thing no one tells you about starting over is that it doesn't feel like starting. It feels like sinking slowly into quicksand, while everyone around you applauds your strength. You're handling this so well, people said to me, colleagues, friends, the therapist I started seeing 3 weeks after David's resignation. You're so composed, so resilient. I smiled when they said this, nodded. Let them believe what they needed to believe, but the truth was that I wasn't handling anything. I was just moving through days like they were obstacle courses, focusing on the next immediate task, so I didn't have to think about the larger shape of what had happened. Wake up, shower, dress, drive, work, drive, undress, sleep, repeat. It's amazing how much you can accomplish when you're not actually present for any of it. The 6 weeks after the coffee incident, I had my first real breakdown. I was at home, alone, doing something completely mundane, loading the dishwasher, I think. And I picked up one of our wedding china plates, the ones we'd registered for together, the ones we'd used exactly twice because David thought they were too formal for everyday meals. I looked at the pattern, blue flowers on white, delicate and precise. I remembered standing in the department store with him, pointing at different options, laughing at how seriously we were taking the decision. These plates will outlast us, I'd said. We need to choose wisely. They'll outlast something anyway, he'd replied. And I'd thought he was being romantic, meaning our love would be eternal, meaning the plates would bear witness to decades of meals together, anniversaries and birthdays and ordinary Tuesdays. But standing in my kitchen, alone, holding a plate that had survived 23 years only to find itself belonging to one person instead of two, I understood what he'd actually meant. The marriage hadn't outlasted the china. I threw the plate across the kitchen. It shattered against the wall with a sound that was deeply, viscerally satisfying. So I threw another one, and another, and another. When I was done, there were no plates left. Just shards of blue and white covering the floor, a mosaic of what I'd thought my life would be. I stood there for a long time, looking at the destruction I'd created, feeling the tight knot in my chest that had been there since that Thursday in March finally start to loosen. Then I got a broom and cleaned it up. The next day I went to a home goods store and bought new plates. Plain white, nothing special, the kind of thing you'd find in a restaurant supply catalog. They didn't mean anything. They were just plates. That was exactly what I needed them to be. Helen called with updates I didn't want to hear. The criminal case is moving forward, she said. The district attorney is taking the forgery seriously. There's a good chance David will face charges. I was standing at my office window, watching the traffic crawl along the streets below. Tiny cars carrying tiny people, all of them rushing somewhere that mattered to them. What does that mean for me? You may be called as a witness. We should prepare. I don't want to testify. A pause. Margot, you may not have a choice. The prosecution will want to establish the harm. I said I don't want to. Another pause. Longer. Can I ask why? I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. Because I don't want to sit in a courtroom and explain to strangers how badly I was fooled. I don't want to answer questions about how I didn't know, why I didn't see it. What kind of idiot stays married to someone for 23 years without noticing that he's planning to commit fraud? I don't want to be cross-examined by his defense attorney about my own failings as a wife. That's not what would happen. Yes, it is. I'd been a lawyer long enough to know exactly how those cases went. That's exactly what would happen, and I'm not going to sit there and let it. Helen was quiet for a moment. Okay, she said finally. Let me see what I can do. What she could do, it turned out, was quite a lot. The criminal case proceeded without my testimony. Other evidence was sufficient. The forger David had hired was cooperating, probably trying to reduce his own sentence. And between his records and David's emails and the documentation of the fake divorce papers, the case was solid. David pled guilty. No trial, no cross-examination, no opportunity for his attorney to suggest that I was somehow complicit in my own humiliation. He got 3 years probation and a fine. No jail time. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself the outcome didn't matter, that closure was a myth, that I needed to focus on the future instead of the past. I was lying, of course, but I was getting good at lying. To myself. It was the only way to keep moving forward. The partners approached me 7 months after David left. We've been talking, Michael said. He was the senior partner, a man I'd worked with for 15 years, someone I trusted as much as I trusted anyone by that point. About the future of the firm. We were in the conference room, the one with the view of the mountains on clear days. It was a clear day. I could see all the way to the ridgeline. What about it? We want to rename it. I turned from the window. Currently it's Whitfield and Associates, he continued. That name is complicated now, and frankly, it was always slightly misleading. You founded this firm. Your name should be on it. It's a major rebrand. The expense, we've run the numbers, it's manageable, and we think it's worth it. He hesitated. We also think it's the right thing to do. You built this place, Margot. You should own it fully, not just on paper, but publicly. I sat down. My legs felt unsteady. What would we call it? Chen Legal, he shrugged. Simple, clean, true. Chen Legal, my maiden name, the name I'd used before I added Whitfield to it. The name I'd gone back to after the divorce. The name my father had given me. The name that carried his history, his immigration story, his decades of working 60-hour weeks in a restaurant so his daughter could go to law school. I thought about what he would have said if he'd lived to see any of this. The building, the betrayal, the possibility of seeing his name on a law firm in Century City. He would have cried, probably. He was a crier. Yes, I said. Let's do it. The unveiling was 6 months later. We'd timed it for the new fiscal year. New name, new chapter, new beginning, or at least the kind of symbolic rebirth that marketing firms get paid a lot of money to manufacture. I stood in the lobby, the same lobby where Sienna had thrown coffee at me, though you wouldn't know it now. We'd redecorated and watched the new logo appear on the wall behind the reception desk. Chen Legal. It was elegant, simple, mine. Barbara was crying. Daniel was beaming. The associates who'd joined us over the past year, who only knew the old regime through office gossip, were clapping and cheering like this was some kind of victory celebration. And maybe it was. For them, for me, it was something quieter. Not triumph, not vindication, just acknowledgement. A correcting of the record. A saying finally and publicly what had always been true. This place existed because of me. I gave a short speech, thanked everyone, made some joke about how happy I was to finally learn how to spell my own company's name correctly. People laughed. We ate cake. Someone put on music. The party continued around me while I stood apart, watching, feeling the strange dislocation that had become familiar over the past year. This was my life now. These people, this place, this name on the wall. I just wasn't sure I knew how to live it anymore. The anniversary of the coffee incident came and went without fanfare. I worked that day, had meetings, signed contracts, did all the things I always did. But at 9:47 a.m., the exact time, according to the lobby security footage that had been entered into evidence, I paused, looked up from my desk, acknowledged the moment, 1 year. It felt simultaneously like a lifetime and like no time at all. I was both completely different from the woman who'd stood in that lobby and exactly the same. The wound had scarred over, but the scar tissue was still tender. I wondered if it always would be. That night, I did something I'd been avoiding for months. I went through the storage unit. After the divorce, I'd put everything I couldn't look at, but couldn't throw away, into a small rented space in a facility off Olympic. Photos, mementos, the letters I'd found in the closet, everything that reminded me of the life I'd thought I was living. I told myself I'd deal with it eventually. Eventually became a year. The unit was dusty and crowded, boxes stacked haphazardly, a physical manifestation of everything I'd refused to process. I sat on the concrete floor with a cardboard box in my lap and started going through it. The first thing I found was our wedding album. We'd gotten married in a courthouse. Neither of us had wanted a big wedding. We were both too practical, too focused on the career we were building together. But we'd hired a photographer anyway, had them capture the moment we signed the papers, the kiss afterward, the ridiculous champagne toast we'd organized in the parking lot. I looked at myself in those photos, 28 years old, so young it hurt to see, wearing a dress I'd bought at a department store, holding the hand of a man I genuinely believed would be my partner forever. There was no way to look at that woman and see what was coming. No way to trace the path from that parking lot to that lobby. She was happy, she was certain, she was wrong. I closed the album, put it back in the box. Didn't throw it away, I still couldn't, but didn't keep looking either. Some things you can acknowledge without dwelling on. Some things are just too heavy to carry for long. I found the coffee-stained blouse at the bottom of a different ball. I'd forgotten I'd put it there. After keeping it in my closet for months, I'd apparently moved it during the redecoration phase, tossed it in with other things I didn't know what to do with. I held it up to the fluorescent light of the storage unit. The stain was still there, of course, rusty brown against cream silk, evidence. For a long moment, I just looked at it. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I cried. The crying lasted longer than I expected. I sat on the floor of that storage unit, surrounded by the artifacts of my marriage, and I wept. For the woman in the wedding photos, for the woman in the lobby, for all the years I'd spent building something that turned out to be a fiction. When it was over, I felt empty, hollowed out, like something that had been stuck inside me for a year had finally broken loose and drained away. I folded the blouse, put it back in the box, locked up the storage unit. But I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a while, watching the lights of the city, feeling the strange lightness of having finally let something go. Things got easier after that. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually, the way a bad injury heals. You don't notice day by day, but then one morning you realize you can do something you couldn't do before. I laughed more, genuinely, not performatively. I started accepting invitations I'd been declining, dinners with friends, events I used to find tedious. I bought new clothes that weren't designed for the courtroom, colors David would have said didn't suit me. I let myself be someone other than who I'd been. The man from San Francisco came into my life quietly. His name was Thomas, tax law. Mild and careful, like I said. We met at a conference in Las Vegas, one of those industry events where people pretend to learn things but really just network and drink. I wasn't looking for anything. I'd given up on the idea of romantic connection, told myself I was too old, too scarred, too unwilling to be vulnerable again. But Thomas was easy. He asked about my work with genuine interest. He didn't try to impress me with his own accomplishments. When I mentioned that I'd recently been divorced, he said simply, "I'm sorry, that sounds hard," and then changed the subject. The first time he visited Los Angeles, we had dinner, then coffee the next morning, then a walk through Griffith Park, talking about nothing important, just enjoying the novelty of being with someone new. "I like you," he said before he flew home. "I'd like to see you again." I said yes. I wasn't sure I was ready. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready, but I said yes anyway because I was tired of letting fear make my decisions. He knows everything now. The forgery, the bigamy, the coffee. I told him all of it, piece by piece, over months of visits and phone calls, and gradually building trust. He listened. He asked questions when he didn't understand something. He never judged. "It sounds like you went through something traumatic," he said, after I'd finished telling him about the lobby incident. "And then you just kept working, kept functioning, didn't let yourself fall apart." "I couldn't afford to fall apart." "I know," he paused, "but it still costs something. Holding it together when everything's breaking, it costs something, even if you don't pay right away." I thought about the plates, the storage unit, the year of feeling like I was watching my life from outside my own body. "Yes," I said, "it does. We're not in love, not yet. Maybe not ever, but we're something. We're two people who've been through difficult things, who are old enough to know that love isn't a lightning bolt. It's a series of choices, repeated day after day, to show up for someone else. I'm showing up. He's showing up. For now, that's enough." 3 years after the coffee. I'm 54 now. My hair is more gray than dark. The lines around my eyes have deepened into something permanent. My body is less forgiving than it used to be, quicker to complain about long hours or missed meals, but I'm still here, still standing, still mine. The firm is thriving. We've expanded into environmental law, an area I'd always been interested in but never had time to pursue when I was co-managing with David. We have a new office in San Francisco. Thomas helped me find the space, though he swears he didn't angle for it just to have an excuse for me to visit more often. The garden is growing. I planted fruit trees last year, citrus and fig, and this spring they produced their first harvest. The satisfaction of eating something you grew yourself is difficult to describe. There's a permanence to it, rootedness. I think about the past less than I used to. Not never, you can't spend 23 years with someone and then erase them completely. But the thoughts are less intrusive now, less painful. David exists in my memory the way a scar exists on skin, a permanent reminder of injury, but no longer bleeding. Last month, I ran into Barbara at the grocery store. She retired last year. Health reasons, though she stays active with her grandchildren and her book club and all the things she'd postponed during her decades at the firm. I hadn't seen her since her farewell party, and I was surprised by how happy I was to see her familiar face. "Margot," she hugged me, right there in the produce section. "How are you? You look wonderful." "I'm good," and I meant it. Really good. We talked for a while, catching up on the small developments that had happened since she left, her grandchildren's achievements, Thomas's latest visit, the citrus trees. "You know," she said before we parted, "I think about that day sometimes, in the lobby." I nodded. I didn't need to ask which day. "I was so scared," she continued. "When that woman started screaming, when she threw the coffee, when you just stood there, dripping, not falling apart, I thought, how is she doing that? How is anyone that strong?" "I wasn't strong," I said. "I was just frozen." "Maybe," she shrugged. "But then you made that phone call, and your voice was so calm, and I thought, okay, if Margot can handle this, we all can." I didn't know what to say to that. I'd never thought of my composure as leadership. I'd thought of it as survival. "You gave people permission to keep functioning," Barbara said. "That mattered. It mattered more than you know." The last time I saw David was 8 months ago. We'd managed to avoid each other for over 2 years, easy enough in a city this big, especially when you're actively trying not to cross paths. But eventually probability caught up with us. It was at a restaurant, one of those places we used to go together, back when we were building the firm and celebrating wins with expensive meals we couldn't quite afford. I'd stopped going after the divorce, but a client had chosen it for a dinner meeting, and I couldn't exactly explain why I wanted to change venues. He was at a table near the back, alone, older than I remembered, or maybe just worn in ways I hadn't anticipated. The charming confidence that used to animate his face had dimmed into something that looked almost like exhaustion. He saw me at the same moment I saw him. For a long second, we just looked at each other, strangers who had once shared a bed, a business, a life. Then he nodded, just once, a small acknowledgement. I nodded back, and we both looked away. I don't know what I expected to feel. Anger, maybe, or vindication, or sadness. The full weight of 23 years compressed into a single moment of eye contact. But what I actually felt was nothing, not numbness that had faded years ago, just completion. The way you feel when you finish a long project and set down your tools, a sense of being done. He was part of my history. He was not part of my present. Those two things could both be true. They were both true. I had dinner with my client, talked about contracts and partnerships and the ordinary machinery of business. Didn't think about David again until I was driving home. And then only briefly. He was there, I was there. We were not there together, that was all. Thomas is coming this weekend. We're going to drive up the coast, maybe stop in Santa Barbara. Not the same hotel, not the same anything. But I'm no longer afraid of cities, just because David made bad memories there. The world is too big to section off places I can't go. He asked me last week if I'd ever consider moving. To San Francisco, he meant, though he didn't say it directly. I don't know, I told him. I've thought about it. No pressure. He said this quickly, the way people do when they're afraid of wanting too much. I'm not asking for anything, just curious. I know, I paused. Let me think about it. I'm still thinking. The firm is in Los Angeles. The house is in Los Angeles. Everything I've built is in Los Angeles. But the person I'm becoming might not need to stay in the place the person I was built things. I don't know yet. The coffee-stained blouse is still in storage. I checked when I was retrieving some old photos for a firm retrospective. It was there, folded in the same box, the stain exactly as I remembered. I didn't take it out, didn't examine it, just noted that it was there. Some evidence you don't need to keep displaying. Some evidence you just need to know exists. If you asked me what I learned from the worst moment of my life, I would tell you something boring. I would tell you that betrayal is survivable. I would tell you that the shape of your life can crack down the middle and you can still be standing when the dust settles. I would tell you that other people, the Barbaras and the Daniels and the Helens, and eventually the Thomases, will appear when you need them, not because the universe is fair, but because people are often kinder than we expect. I would tell you that revenge is overrated, that I never screamed at David, never publicly destroyed him, never took satisfaction in his failures. And that was the right choice, not because I'm noble, but because revenge would have required me to keep caring about what happened to him, and caring was something I couldn't afford anymore. I would tell you that the blouse is ruined, and the plates are shattered, and the marriage is over, and none of that matters as much as the fact that the garden is growing. The last time I thought about Sienna was 2 months ago. Someone mentioned her name in a meeting. She's working now, a real job, something in marketing. Apparently she's good at it. Apparently she's building a life that has nothing to do with any of this. I was glad to hear it. Not because I forgive her. Forgiveness feels like the wrong word for something that complicated. But because I understand now that we were both casualties of the same explosion. She was louder about her suffering. I was quieter about mine. Neither of us was wrong. I hope she's happy. I hope she learned something from all of this. I hope she never throws coffee at anyone ever again. In 3 weeks, I'll turn 55. Thomas is planning something. He's being secretive about it, which is both charming and slightly ridiculous. At our age, surprises feel less magical and more logistically challenging. But I'm letting him plan. I'm letting myself be someone who can receive things without calculating what they cost. That's growth, I think. The firm throws an annual party now. Employee appreciation, my idea, implemented last year. At the most recent one, I gave a speech, nothing formal, just some remarks about how far we'd come, how proud I was of what we'd built together, how the name on the building was just letters, but the people inside were what made it real. Afterward, a young associate came up to me. Couldn't have been more than 26, the same age I was when I started. She looked nervous, the way young people do when they're talking to someone they see as powerful. Ms. Chen, she said, I just wanted to say, I moved to Los Angeles 2 years ago, and everyone told me it would be impossible to break into this field. And then I interviewed here, and you hired me, and she stopped, took a breath. You told me in my interview that everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves, that you'd rather hire for potential than pedigree. And I wanted to say thank you for giving me a chance. I remembered that interview. Remembered her nervousness, her determination, her answers that weren't polished but were honest. I remembered being her, 30 years ago, standing in front of people who held my future in their hands, hoping they'd see past the parts that didn't fit. You earned your place here, Intern, I told her. The chance was yours to take. You took it. She beamed, walked away looking lighter than she had before. And I thought, This is what it's for, all of it. The work, the building, the name on the wall, not the legacy, not the achievement. The chance to open a door for someone who's standing where you used to stand. The stain on the blouse never came out, but I'm still wearing silk. Different blouses, different days, different versions of myself. The garden is growing, the firm is thriving. The man from San Francisco might be something more than just something someday. And I am here, still standing, still building, still mine. That's enough. That's more than enough.